No questions, everyone is quiet, so I would say we start with the official show. So, welcome to the 126th edition, September edition of airhacks TV. And today we have lots of small topics and the time machine was also great. So we will look back again 100 episodes back to the episode 26th. And we have a rejoiner of the show, Anbu Sampath. So welcome back. And Krizo and Zoltan, they are just, alumni. So looking forward to see you all. So let's take a look at the questions. So, and the very good question is, so the problem, Mr. Dimpile asked on the 125th edition of airhacks this question, and so I just copied it over here. So the question is, I wrote a blog post in 2017 that JSON will replace DTOs, which is actually true. Right now I'm using JSON everywhere, and in most cases JSONP. So after 7 years, in my project it is really true, and I avoid JSONB for various reasons. And the reasons are flexibility and mostly testing. And this is so it turns out the more complex it gets, the more complex the structure, the easier JSONP is to handle. And in a trivial project, I use JSONB. So you ask me how to validate JSON projects, and interestingly, I wrote a blog post and recorded even video. I didn't really watch the video, but the blog post is there. And you can absolutely have validation of JSON objects with JAX-RS and bin validation, because you can write a custom validator with annotations or whatever you like, and therefore it is doable. But I'm not doing this. What I'm usually doing right now is, for instance, I'm implementing Java records, and these Java records get a JSON object as a component. Exactly, this is the name I search for, as a component, and then I can have methods which expose the JSON object, and also I can have the compact constructor which validates the JSON object. This is one possibility, or I just would write my own validator which validates the JSON. And there's a trick now for the validation. You could actually use JSONPath, which is part of the JSONP specification. JSONPath. So let's see, JSONPath, JSONB. And JSONP, and here it is. So no, it is not, because it's a part of the JSONP and JSONB. There's an issue 2021, but I'm already using this. It's an issue here, but the issue, it is already available. JSON pointer and JSON path. So what it means is, you can pick from a complex structure, you can search or pick whatever you like, and then see whether it is there. And also, now it comes back. Also, what you could do is, I would just fire off Firefox. What you could do is, you could also use JSON div. Let's see, JSONB, Jakarta, and JSON div. And we actually did it in the pre-corona workshops at Munich Airport. And JSONP and JSONB. I don't know, but there should be a div. Anambin JSON div. You see? 7 years old, and this is how it looks like. So I will just put to the chat this link. So just add it. So, and what I did here is we actually covered this as well on the airhacks workshop at Munich Airport. I remember there was one attendee who had a startup with Java EE, Jakarta EE and Microprofile. So if you have two objects, you can have div, and they say, okay, if there is no div, the object are identical, right? So so would you need a kind of a reference objects and test it against? Okay, this is not very good for validation actually, but very good for testing. So this is different. This is not the answer to your question. Sorry for that, but yeah. So I think there's a JSON div, and let's see whether I find NMB JSON pointer. Let's see. Yes, this is a newer post. So you have a JSON, and what you can have is you can have a JSON pointer. This is exactly what I talk about right now. And with the JSON pointer, you can see, okay, you know exactly that this, should have a specific value. This is like a structure, but it ships with Microprofile in Java EE, so there is nothing to do. Yes, but I'm using these features usually for system testing, and as an input parameter validation, I'm less fancy. For me, testability is more important. So what I use usually even an interface with a static method in a past JSON object, and it validates the objects, for instance. Or you can have a Java record with a static method which validates the object. So, okay. So now first question from the audience, Mr. I guess Mufak, do you recommend using Redux with custom elements for a big system? Custom elements, I guess, web components. And I'm absolutely recommend to use Redux for a big system. For a small system, go without Redux. And I would suggest to use Redux Toolkit for that, not Redux Toolkit. And I use Redux Toolkit in all my projects which are web components related. And I have to say, developers like it. So it's not only about me. I recommended it several times, and the feedback was always positive. Especially for Java developers, Redux is very simple. It looks like a nested hash map, a singleton hash map with event handling. This is Redux basically. Yeah, very good. Next one. So I think we covered the JSON objects. Now the time machine is interesting. So I actually created even a link to the origin post 8 years ago. Yes, 8 years ago is amazing. And so there were some years moved to wars, which is a good idea. And they had JSF, which talks to the backend. And the question is, should they use asynchronous processing? What's also interesting is they thought about using Node.js back then. And so response, because we have peak in 2,000 users concurrent, 2,000 concurrent users. For Java EE, 2,000 concurrent users is not that much, or for Java, nothing about Java EE. And yeah, interestingly, JSF is coming back a bit, right? So there's an HTMLX specification also on the podcast, or specification, a framework. So if you go to the podcast, airhacks FM, and search for HTMX, so there is a Carson Gross is the creator of HTMX. So we covered, why it happened and how it looks like and what is the history of it. And it was already 2 years ago. But the HTMX is becoming more popular right now. You could also use HTMX together with components. So, but you need a backend, something like JSF, JSPs, or similar, or Quarkus templates engine, or Velocity, and whatever, right? So, and I think could become more popular. And JSF is even working on with Quarkus again. Okay, so so that one, so less relevant. So this is more interesting. Payment type still relevant. So there's one interface, and depending on this type, Mr. G. Burant would like to switch between different implementations. And the question is how to do that. And you would have to package or wrap the payment in an instance, and you can select according on the fly to the annotations, or I would be less fancy. I will directly inject all the implementations without the interface and have a nice switch expression, Java 21 switch expression here. So also interesting. So there's something reusable in the project, and the question is, should we put it in utils? So this is a never-ending stream of utils questions or commons. The question is how to put it. And in this particular case, I would just put IBAN credited number validator and phone number validator into a validator package, for instance, right? This is also interesting. So I'm searching like how to kill a BPM project. So let's see what I wrote. How to kill a SOA project, exactly. So this was one of my of the posts which were very successful, and this is with questions to ask. So having said that, I'm actually using some project, not BPMN rather than what is the question? BPM rather than BPMN, for transition making or decision making. But back then the idea was we use SOA for everything, and we achieve reuse. So I don't think this is about reuse. So this is more about in modern systems we have several services, and we need a state machine-like way to call our service. If it fails, call something different, and we need maybe a way to represent this somehow, right? So this is the as a diagram, for instance, right? So this is what I meant, and so my opinion is fairly simple to BPMN. If you need, if you have long-running transactions, workflow engine, BPMN, or step functions on AWS is the way to go, for instance, right? Still. So serialization view scope, I would say this is an old story, and so we can skip that because no more relevant. So multi-tenancy in Java EE are still important, not necessarily in Java EE everywhere. And the question is, would we like, to maintain the tenant ID and have a switch on the backend, or we maintained independent systems from each other, completely siloed, and and every client gets an own system, which is also possible. So, but with Java EE, it's of course absolutely possible. You can have a tenant ID and pass it and inject it everywhere, and you can have multiple entity managers which point to different databases. So it's not a problem at all. So thread local to pass tenant information along. So you could use request scopes, of course, for that. So rich faces is out of life. So you could use, of course, prime faces. Interestingly, prime faces is still a thing, so you can still use it. So how to structure application to ECB, also important question, and where to put generic stuff like base entity in my posts. And and the answer is you put the base entity in the posts. If post is the name of the application, then I will. But what here is missing is the component. So post is the component, but application name. So I think business is or application is app. Okay, business. Okay, I get it. So the business and presentation, they are two independent layers in this case. So I will put it on the app level, the base entity. So it's still relevant questions. So stopping the container takes a long time, not in my experience. So how to redeploy, you could do this. All application servers were about redeployment, not Quarkus. Let's see. Not relevant. So JPA relationship, one-to-many, 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 one-to-many. Interesting part because this is a never-ending story. We get the same problems in even NoSQL databases, because if you have everything in a document and something has to be loaded from outside, so it always means two requests, and you would like to minimize the requests. And of course, in JPA we have the decision, eager or lazy loading. This is all about that. And this was the time machine. I would say I would say 80% of the questions we could re-ask right now, and no one will notice that they are 8 years old, right? Okay, so this was from there. Now, next one, very interesting. So, what is your opinion about running application servers on Kubernetes OpenShift? Very good idea. Why not? So I did it all the time. So right now I spend more time in serverless projects because in public cloud is the way to go, usually because of costs. But we never had any problems with JBoss, Whitefly, or Payara on OpenShift. So actually, I'm a fan of OpenShift, and it works great. So I wouldn't use it on plain Kubernetes because we should be too lazy to maintain plain Kubernetes. But if you have a nice distribution like OpenShift, I think way to go. So 300 Jakarta EE applications with Java 11, not bad. And they acquired OpenShift to run on premises, also a good idea. And yeah, this is cloud native microservices. I would say, I think no one knows what cloud native actually means, right? So if someone says, ask me, is it cloud native or not? I always re-ask, what do you mean by that? Let's see. Why private? I don't know, but doesn't matter. So let's open what I wanted to. I think it was 12 factor apps, right? Factor.net. Was it? Yeah. So the 12 factor app was a huge marketing gig from, I think, from Heroku, right? From Heroku. Who was behind 12 factor apps? This was the question. I forgot about that. But if you read this, the entire Jakarta EE and Microprofile, they are absolutely cloud native, right? So there is nothing not cloud native. So I would even argue Kubernetes is not cloud native because on premise it is. But if you would put Kubernetes to the cloud, it is a cloud on the cloud. So why we need two clouds, right? So this is, but on premise, absolutely. So now the question is, why JBoss is not cloud native, and why Quarkus or Micronaut are better than JBoss. So this is the question to ask. So many of these applications are very simple. ThinWars, a great idea, and rewrite them to Quarkus doesn't make any sense. It could make sense in a second. So managing physical servers is very tricky. Can be tricky. Doesn't have to. Also back to this in a second. So should we stop using JBoss EAP for new applications? So and this is a different question to ask, because what you should do is, or we could do right now is, we could go to Whitefly GitHub and go to activity. They are the contributors. And here's the activity. So this is Mr. Brian Stanbury and all the others. And this is the new commits to Whitefly. And now we do the same with Quarkus. And I hope this is the right one. Not that this is the, seems like. So we go to the contributors and see what happens. And as you see already, so Quarkus has far more contributors which are still contributing. This is more evenly spread, whereby Whitefly is mostly depending on 2 persons or 3. So it means Quarkus is far more active than Whitefly. So the future of Quarkus is brighter than Whitefly. So this is now also a question to consider, what should we stop using JBoss EAP for new applications? I would say for new applications, I personally would use Quarkus. It is JBoss on steroids, basically. So Quarkus has repackaged JBoss, which is faster and leaner, but it uses JBoss technologies. And should we rewrite all applications? I wouldn't do that. I would always rewrite on purpose, not just for fun. So So my approach would be, first, you can absolutely run JBoss on OpenShift. I don't see any problems with it. Now, what would be the motivation to rewrite the applications? And what I did, I prepared in the pre-show. So there's a podcast episode 203 with Daniel Lipp. And they asked me exactly the question, when was it? 2 years ago, whether they should move from JBoss to Quarkus. So we had a meeting, and I was hired by them. And I say, I would do this, and they did it. So this was also OpenShift, so you can listen to the podcast. So they migrated from JBoss to Quarkus. What happened then is they could reduce the memory footprint, I think, by a half. So you can achieve with Quarkus higher density. Quarkus is this I would say the smallest runtime on Earth. So it means on premise, you can really save money with Quarkus. So what it means is, what you could do, you could rewrite JBoss applications to Quarkus with the motivation to save hardware on premise and CO2 and power and whatever. And so with Quarkus you will save. I would say Spring is too big. Another option would be Micronaut, but I would go with Quarkus. Why? Because Quarkus is highly compatible with JBoss. Okay. Let's see. Where is my chat, actually? So here it is. No questions. Okay. No question is good. Or not good. Is bad, but I don't feel, bad. Crazy DevOps. Is it possible to use Quark with Java application or Docker container to create a single image that can reload environment-specific settings, or must there be a separate Docker image per environment? So, what's the problem? What Quark is, it just creates a static image of the entire environment, which is loaded. So there is no boot process anymore. You are loading everything, right? It's tricky because I have the same problem without Quark and without snap start with Lambda. And my observation is the following: all serverless-like environments, and with Quark it goes with those fast startup times and so forth, right? So all serverless runtimes are immutable usually. So what it means is, if something changes in the environment, usually it means you have to create a new release. So this is the way to go. So how to deal with it? So what I do is I separate in the cloud between static configuration and dynamic configuration. And the static configuration is unchangeable. So it is actually even worse. So what we try to do in some projects, we are loading the configuration from XML or database to memory as much as possible, so that the image is highly optimized image that boots faster. And then we have dynamic configuration, which is stored outside. It can be in Git. It's in current project is parameter store. It can be external database, or it could be a REST service. And this service is hit by every request. And of course, it can be slow. So because it's slow, every request. So what you will usually do, you will add some caching. And this is tools like Lambda Power Tools, I think is the name of the project from AWS, are doing this. If you have on AWS, you can of course implement it by yourself. So, next question. What are pros and cons of using record builder versus Lombok? Builder, annotation, record classes. I use the manual approach. I never use Lombok. Record classes are just perfect. And what I do with records, sometimes they have static method create, where I'm more flexible with the parameters, for instance. Next question is, what's your opinion on using Java Stack for cross-platform GUI development? Glue on JavaFX and GraalVM is too late for Java desktop applications? No, I would say Glue on the JavaFX and GraalVM are vibrant is environment, so you could just go for it, and it solves your problem right now. And you are a Java developer, I think you are more productive than comparable platforms. I would say with that, if you know what they are doing, you are more productive than how it's called, the new Google UI toolkit. Forgot about that, so chat will have to help me. Forgot the name. It was called with the new JavaScript-like programming language, and you can deploy to Android and to Android to iOS at the same time, right? So should another language or framework be considered instead? So what I also always consider first is plain web components with Redux. Great environment, and if you are interested in such a thing, I even created, it's called BCE Design Adam Bean. And this is my GitHub project, which I use for SPA, but it's not native. It is. It could look native-like, but this BCE design is for building JSF-like applications in a browser with web components and Redux. So this is the template. We'll also put it to chat. Flutter is the name, of course. Patrick, thank you. So my impression, Flutter, to install Flutter is really painful. The installation, you need several gigabytes to download, but Flutter is more popular than JavaFX. So this is pros and cons. For specific project, I would pick JavaFX, but I would consider web platform first. Why? No dependencies on anything. It's just browser APIs. And so it means no updates, and it cannot die because it will only die if browser dies, right? So in this project, I don't use any external dependencies except lit.html, which is tiny, and Redux, which is also tiny. I think you could maintain both libraries in a project in case they die in a few years, or should die in a few years. Okay, almost done. But what I also have are my own, let's see, topics. And so there's thoughts on constructor injection v2. So I got some comments that the constructor injection is way to go. I would say I don't miss constructor injection in my project. And by the way, let's see where it was. I will have to click here for a brief moment. Open in a new tab. So hopefully it won't start. No, stop. And there was a question. It's the only way to go if you want to make use of static code analysis tools such as Nullway. Yes, but I would say if you have to use such a tools, then you have to use constructor injection. But it is strange that such tools prescribe how to build code, If a static analysis tool says I'm only working with this pattern, it's a smell, right? And I would say, but sometimes you have such requirements that your software has to be statically analyzed, and then I would just implement, the constructor injection. So it's not like I'm completely against. It's more like I don't miss constructor injection, and if someone introduces constructor injection, I'm asking, why? What is the benefit of doing this? Because it ends up having more code. And I thought actually today about what could be the reason to have it. So the reason is if you are really in highly complex project with even, I don't know whether concurrency plays a role, but with constructor injection, the interesting part is you can be sure that everything is injected. So without constructor injection, you also are sure that everything is injected, because if one inject doesn't work, the entire class will die, right? Or instance will die. So I'm against everything, which seems nice, but there is no obvious advantage, right? So then I'll say, okay, why we are doing this? Be lazy. Okay. Misusing interfaces. So this is even worse than constructor injection. What I find myself doing more often is I'm not injecting always, classes. Classes or I'm not injected beans, right? Instead, I use static methods on interfaces and implement simple logic there, and can use, JUnit test to testers, or more like functions in interface. So this works great. So JSON object validation, exactly, we already covered that. Thoughts on Microprofile and Jakarta EE. So friend of the show on Twitter pinged me privately and said, okay, I'm just referring, Microprofile and Jakarta EE, it was, and now whether I'm still on it, right? So whether I like Microprofile and Jakarta EE right now. And my answer is, I'm using Microprofile and Jakarta EE all the time, but for me, it's more like I'm using Java all the time, right? So I'm not mentioning I'm using Java all the time. I'm using Java all the time. But what I found myself doing, which is interesting, I'm replacing Microprofile and Jakarta EE with Java 21. So for instance, before I use HTTP client, Microprofile HTTP client, I use, or REST client, sorry, I use the Java 11 HTTP client if it solves my problem, because it is even less dependencies or less unknown code, right? So if possible, I use Java 21. And if this is not enough, I just using Microprofile and Jakarta EE, and this is usually enough. And sometimes I use proprietary Quarkus extensions. So also, maybe you noticed that my blog looks a bit different. And you also maybe noticed that in the few months, I didn't post it a lot because I was angry. And the question is why I was angry. And the answer is because of Docker. So I did a mistake. And I lost half a year of my articles on my blog post. But I had a backup on my machine, but the backup was not. It was in an editor. It was not in the database. And but what I did during pandemic, maybe you know, I recorded apps with Microprofile workshop. And if you take a look at the workshop, what I implemented there is a block engine with microservice architecture and Microprofile based Quarkus independent. And so I thought about this and I said, okay, my blog is ancient. So if you search for the very first post, is why blogging in 2006. And I just liked the software and I wanted to install the software on my server. And I did it and enjoyed that, and my blog became popular, and this is the entire story, right? So what I did in two weeks ago, I think on a weekend, no kidding, I took the Microprofile training code, merged the both microservices, simplified everything even further, because in the training I had to be more complicated, right? I have to show all the APIs, so I exaggerated a bit to show you more features, but if I'm building software for myself, I can throw away whatever not necessary, do exactly what I need. And what you see right now, it behaves like Apache Roller with hypersonic database behind the scenes, but it's actually Quarkus with Microprofile, Jakarta EE, and FileStore, which I implemented. So and it runs on Docker. And so it means I use Microprofile with Quarkus and really enjoy that. And I replace lots of Microprofile with Java 21, which was an interesting experience. So and I could run it in the cloud, but I use public clouds now all the time. So it's okay. Let's put it on the server and modernize it a bit. So it was a really pleasant experience how productive Java actually is. And the block engine is it is for you. It looks good. My API is not. I'm not satisfied with it, but it's getting there, and I can do things right now which are not possible. Maybe even LLM integration. So you will see this in the next workshop. Yeah. So so what it means, the blog runs on my private cloud. And not on public cloud, and yeah, it's a nice experience. Also, what I noticed, I already recorded 650 YouTube Java shorts, over 650, which is a lot. I didn't notice this even, and it is a never-ending story. With every short, I get idea for 5 more shorts. And back then I did lots of experiments with unit tests, and now I record a short for me. If it works, I publish it on YouTube. Okay, so this is what I have for you today, and this was the workshop where today I also find out is okay. I would also will show you embeddings and vector databases. So I think there's also a good use case for it. And again, I think I will offer a workshop at the Munich airport. At Munich airport, in addition to online one, because I get lots of questions regarding this. So Sam asked me, constructor injection was okay for testing DAO classes that had only one field injected, JDBC template. Instead of starting Spring context for tests, I started Postgres in test content and created a DAO. Okay, I have no experience with Spring, but I had no such problems with Glassfish or Quarkus. And well, let's see how Adam Bean JPA integration test. You should find old blog posts from me. Yes, this would happen back then. Yeah, I just used create entity. I could use, for instance, the entity manager from locally, but this is a simple one. An old article. Point being is, I instantiated JPA entities, JPA manager by hand, injected it to class in unit test, and didn't even start at Glassfish or something. I just had my own entity manager, and I used either production database or H2 or Hypersonic database. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not against it. You can use constructor injection, but for unknown reasons, some people who use constructor injection, they are very strict and they really believe in the constructor injection. They say you should always use the constructor injection, and this always and strictness, I don't like such attitude, because there are cases where constructor injection is great, and I don't have such a cases yet. But if I get, then I will use it, of course, right? Exactly the same story like with Lombok. I usually don't use Lombok in my projects, but if I had to build one important or one interesting feature is if I would have to implement a cache which caches according to equals and hash code of Java objects, I could implement this hash code equals and hash code consistently with Lombok. And this would be a feature where I would use Lombok. But having said that, right now I would use Java records, and hash code in equals already implemented. So I would say, I always try to find a feature in Java before I reach to an external library. Yeah, personally, I like package private. Exactly, Sam. Package private. I thought you're thinking private. I not use private anymore if injection is available, because why? If we are in smaller projects, we have less and less crazy developers who just set private fields or package private directly. So package private and unit test, you can just set it. This is what I do. Yes, Sam, perfect. Rammed on the shop on the Discord. And we had a conversation with Thomas, and he told me, okay, in some projects there is important that you have a constructor injection, but I disagree, Thomas. If you choose to use constructor injection, you should use it everywhere. It depends on project size, right? Because I have some projects where we use dependency injection in parts, and in other parts there is absolutely no dependency injection, and we use static methods. So I would say, if the project has, I would say you have 50 components and all are CRUD which talk to database, I agree. But what I have, 5 components which talk to database, other components talk somewhere else, some are Lambda listeners where I don't like to have dependency injections, so there's complete different story. So I'm with you. If you have a huge project with similar use cases, then I give you a point, say yes. Okay, and Lenny said also SonarLint will require constructor injection by default. Yes, but so this is why I wouldn't like SonarLint and the null value, I think, because why a tool dictates, a quality tool dictates, how I build. I mean, even better would be if a constructor injection verification tool will require constructor injection, right? This would be the best. Okay, Spring best practices are a constructor injection. Maybe, I have no idea, but what I remember in Spring was that at the beginning they were against injection. They say everything has to be configurable in XML because injection is too slow. So what I remember. Okay, you see, dependency injection causes some interactivity on the block, which is cool. So by the way, if you would like to continue the discussion, you can join Discord. So we can already have, I think, a thread with constructor injection. But from me, don't expect any, any positions because what's that? Yeah, this is, for instance, validator factory. So I just created that without injecting anything. So I'm a huge fan of just, using whatever I like in unit tests. And I'm also not using, I have to admit, how to call it, the test containers a lot. Because I believe in production-like environment and completely local environment, and test containers maybe are nicer, but not always, they behave like the real thing. Having said that, I wish you all the best remaining summer, and keep asking questions, and I will create, maybe even tomorrow, the next 127th airhacks QA sheet, so be free to ask questions as always. And I still enjoy, after 8 years, talking to you, and a nice community, and nice questions actually, and you see, some of us like constructor injection, other likes package private field injection. What I like, I don't like private. For instance, it's just if you have a private injection, you will need setters, getters, or something, or constructor, and the question is why. But still, we are all productive, right? Which is great news. So having said that, I would say see you at upcoming workshops, airhacks Live. Listen to podcasts. Next one would be great. So I just messed up the editing, but don't tell it Nikolai. But I will publish it tomorrow. So a little bit late. That's the problem. And yeah, enjoy Java. Have a great time. Bye.